Welcome to the House of Genes podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Guzman, head of performance for 3x4 Genetics. And we've got a fantastic guest today, but also a really close friend of mine, Megan Young. Megan's got an incredible story, the places that she's coached at, kind of the way that she sees strength conditioning and performance, I think is really important. And we're going to talk a little about the health side as well. What are some things that athletes may need to consider that they haven't? But most importantly is understanding how Megan got to be where she's at. She's got some pretty big accolades that I don't know if she'll share herself, but I will share for her. She was the NSCA Strength Conditioning Coach of the Year, which is a huge honor. That means that all of these respected coaches in the NSCA, they take a vote and nominate people, and Megan was respected across the league. And when we get into it, I think it's the first time someone in soccer has won this, which is pretty impressive. Anyways, Megan, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on. How you doing?
Great, Dan. Thanks for having me. I think that uh, it is so interesting anytime you get to be a guest with a friend because there's this other conversation happening within a conversation. So I'm so excited for us to dive in.
Yeah, I'm pumped. Anytime we have conversations, it kind of just flows anyways. And I think it's going to be really fun for people to kind of listen in and see where we're going with this. Would you start by just telling us a little bit about your story? I would think key things like how did you get into strength conditioning, maybe where you first started, and then kind of walk us along. I know this stuff, but I want our listeners to kind of learn a little bit about this.
Yeah, I think I got into strength and conditioning almost by mistake. I was a college thrower and I thought, hey, I'm going to go to law school. I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was like 4 or 5. I would carry a briefcase around, like just true nerd from day one. And about 2 weeks into meeting my college strength coach at UNC Wilmington, he looked at me and he goes, hey, you're going to do this. And I was like, you're right. And I changed degree programs and I started spending all my time outside training in class around him, other athlete groups, even being able to start training because back in, to age myself, the early 2000s, mid-major programs were definitely under-resourced with a coaching side. So it created an opportunity for me to be much more active even before I ever had my first certification or degree. From there, I went to Baylor University. At Baylor, it was a cool experience because it was a program built for strength and conditioning. And at that time, there was only like 5 in the world that were non-clinical, like cardiac rehab, exercise physiology degree programs. So they were actually based in like what are methods, principles of strength and conditioning, of speed agility, of all these things. So to be able to have that from a true classroom setting, but also a practical setting, working with football and basketball and some great coaches there. And then I went on to be a professional intern after that program at Auburn University. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered a full-time role at Auburn. I was there almost 12 years. And then I started in American football, baseball, women's basketball, and that's when that soccer thing really started. And I've been very fortunate. I did not play soccer really at any point in my life other than in graduate school. I played on a rec team with 11 former Baylor seniors and my best friend who was an All-American soccer player and myself. So
Yes.
just like a very interesting mix up of a team we called the Cupcakes. So that was my playing experience. And then I've turned that into a long career working in a sport of soccer. And it was really interesting to have time at Auburn to grow and learn the game without the bias of being a player. I think that's been a rare enjoyment of mine that a lot of coaches within soccer don't really have. Many other performance coaches that are in soccer, they've played soccer, they love soccer. Like that's everything about them. And from there, I became a high performance director in the NWSL with a team at the time called the Chicago Red Stars. They're now called the Chicago Stars. And then in 2001, I joined the Seattle Sounders as a performance coach in the MLS, and I was there until pretty much January of this year. And then I just finished doing some combine work with some people down in Southern California, and now I'm doing of my own stuff.
Okay, we're gonna get into some of your own stuff because I definitely want to see where you're at now. Let's go back real quick because there's a few key things. Number one, a lot of the listeners in this podcast, they're coaches. We have some parents that are listening. Like what is high performance, which is the second thing we're gonna get to. But talk about like this pivot. you said that soccer kind of like came to you when you're at Auburn. What is that like when it's a sport that may be a little bit more foreign to you? Like you said, you played some sort of rec soccer with your friends and your All American best friend. But what is that like when you have this new opportunity? Because there might be a lot of coaches where they're like, I played baseball, I'm doing baseball S&C. Or you get to the university setting and you're like, oh, now I have men's, women's tennis, or I have something different. Like, talk through kind of how you can encourage people to see the bright side of that. Because sometimes I think people have the blinders on. They're like, well, that's not my sport. Like, how am I going to relate to that? And I think there's so much opportunity for people to bring an outside perspective to a different sport where they don't see that.
Yeah, I think there's like two ways that people see sport and performance. It's like either being a generalist or super, super niche. And they don't realize that both are true at the same time. It's not a yes or a no. It's, hey, you can go through and evolve over time. And this didn't happen overnight. I lived with one of the assistant soccer coaches, and all we did was watch soccer. Oh, that was it. For 6 years, that was my life, and I got to learn the game. And fortunately enough too, like I remember as a kid, if a soccer game was on Sunday, it was called a nap because the picture quality, the image quality of trying to watch a European football game in the early 90s didn't exist.
Yeah.
By Yeah, exactly. By 2010, if you wanted to watch a Premier League game, one, you could, and you could access multiple, and then two, the image quality allowed it to be something a novice or a new learner could actually sit with and be more familiar of what we see in basketball or what we see in sport here of like image quality, closeness, capture, all those things. So I think that I learned it at the right moment where the world's game has grown in America more than ever. And like the World Cup is here this summer. So I think that's part of it. As far as like the coaching piece, I think that is all in like a curiosity mindset and like what's your philosophy as a coach? Is it to just stay within this one lane, or are you curious enough to maybe understand how these principles and methods and things that you've grown to develop and use as like your tools and your resource and your understanding and build your own system, they apply to many things, not any one thing. Because then the day, a tissue is tissue, joints are joints, a system is a system. Now the movement, the capacity, and the capability might be different when we're kicking a ball versus shooting one, but the tissue quality and going through the understanding of a needs analysis of a sport still exists. And there's more research than ever on understanding sports. So what does it take to, you have fans that spend more time in sport data than I will ever spend now. So like that is so interesting.
That's
And
true.
there's no lack of information. I'm not going to call it knowledge. There's no lack of information out there in sports. And I mean, one, because people make money off of it, and two, because it's professional sport has been our career, but it's other people's entertainment. So you always have to remember that of like, where do you sit in that world? Like, kind of for us, we've sat within that insular kind of protected piece of sport where we service the members, aka the athletes and the team that are part of this entertainment business.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think we see a different part of it. We've had this conversation before, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't always enjoy or look forward to going to sporting events now. It's almost like you need a little bit of a break because we've seen so many games where it's like we know all the buildup that goes to it. If it's hanging out with friends, I'm into it. When people say, "Hey, you want to go watch this team?" I'm like, I don't know. Like, I want to watch something different. I want to go to a pickleball tournament. I want to learn something that's totally different than what I've seen, or do something that's curious for my own brain. But you touched on the curiosity part, which I think is big. Can you real quick, um, kind of talk about? So you said you were a high performance director in the NWSL. I talk about high performance a lot. People don't know what high performance means. They're like, what is high performance? And I think we all have different definitions, but would you give, even if it's not a strict definition, like how you would talk to someone that's never heard that term ever before? When you're like, I was a high performance director, like, what does that actually mean? What are you
All
looking
right.
at?
So I'd say my mission now is to help 100 million people achieve a high performance lifestyle. So I'll double click into that. What does that mean? A high performance lifestyle can look different for everyone, but it's trying to optimize the component parts that you have behavior change control opportunities for to increase your longevity and your health span. Health span is the quality of each year of your life. Longevity is how long you live. So for me, the high performance lifestyle is the underpinning factors that we can control for that. The difference within a pro team is you have sub teams of teams within a professional team that all have individual parts that align to that high performance. So a high performance director helps with all those tertiary and ancillary subcomponent parts to make sure that we're aligned on mission, value, and purpose.
So we're talking not just strength conditioning, we're talking nutrition, we're talking about mental training, psychology, we're talking about athletic training and
And
injury
sport coaches.
therapy, sport coaches, right? It's bringing all these different groups together as one interconnected piece. That's what I think that's great. And I think this is also a cool conversation because one thing you said that I love is that, you didn't want to call it knowledge, you want to call it information because we know that these days people want to measure everything. I just saw, I actually think it's pretty cool. My wife was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't like technology out everything. But have you seen Throne Science where they're measuring like, your bowel movements in your toilet? Like there's biomarkers and there's technology for all this kind of stuff. But I think what you're trying to say is like sometimes more information isn't necessarily better. But you're right, it's entertainment for the fans. When you and I are thinking about like what's actually going to be useful, what's your process when you're looking at data and trying to figure out, should I integrate this in with my athletes now, or is this noise, or are they just not ready for it? Like, what does that look like for you?
When you first started being a coach, like a lot of what you do is mirror what you see done
Totally, yeah.
because you
Imitate.
don't have a filter and a system. And then you have enough experience at some point to be like, okay, maybe that's true in this environment, but in my environment, it's not the best fit. I think that you keep adding to that filter, and then if you're fortunate enough to go to different environments or work with different populations and get hours and hours and hours of actual coaching experience and then actual decision making or managerial experience, and insert all those little things, managing up, managing across, building culture, understanding the difference between buy-in and compliance is something one of my friends said the other day, and I was like, oh my God, like that is so true. So like having that filter and then taking something and saying, where did this come from? And what question was it trying to answer? And I think it comes back to almost a scientific method. Does this have a question it's trying to solve for? And is that also a question I'm trying to solve for? If it's just another piece of tech or information or another touch point that a player has to say yes to, I'm going to have some friction built up towards that. Unless the ROI is so high, I can't say no because that just makes sense to do. And that's happened a couple times, right? Like GPS is probably one of those. It probably makes sense to like collect and understand what you do with the people when you have them. And then, then in strength and conditioning, specifically to the gym, people are like, probably makes sense to understand volume, intensity, and intent. And like, oh, then you have like these devices that measure speed. It's like, cool. And then it said, oh, we should probably do the same in rehab. And now we have these devices that load and measure volume intensities in rehab. So it's like, we kind of keep just iterating it into every environment that we have until it's applied everywhere. Now the tools might look different, but the intent is the same. It's still answering the better question. So when I'm looking at all these things and deciding what goes where, it's like, well, do I have an issue or a question I'm trying to solve for in this space? And if the answer is no, then I'm like, is the ROI on this value? One, either everyone else within this performance environment is going to adopt this and we have to, because that's just going to be the standard. And that happens sometimes within professional sports. And then two, who's the key stakeholder for it? Another part of that is like your management team, your GM and your technical director and all of that. And where is this request coming from? Did I stumble upon this? Who brought it to me? Is this something, someone in our academy system has brought up and they've done diligence and research in it. So it just depends on all those contextual factors. And once you filter all that down, it becomes much more clear in your decision tree of like, is this a yes or a no or a maybe? And it's, let's do a case study and a pilot study and then further down. And there's so much good research that happens within professional teams that no one will ever know about because we can't, So there are now like, I think of Darcy Norman, I think of Adam Virgil, and some of these people that get to share a little bit more of like what they actually do or they're able to publish, and it's like that's fantastic. And then my question always goes back to like, how is it serving the community that they work with directly? And if I find that connection, I'm like, that's cool. That's kind of like the ideal goal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, it's what's the question? And people that aren't in pro sports should ask that too. What is the question I'm trying to answer? Am I getting an Oura ring because my family members got it? Or do I need to try to figure out my sleep habits and hygiene and things that I can change for that? Because sleep is an important issue and my sleep is horrible. So I think asking questions is key. On a different podcast, we're going to talk about buy-in and engagement, all that kind of stuff. For me, there's like compliance. Can our athletes be obedient to what we're asking them to do, which is a little bit of trust? And then there's buy-in. Like, okay, I'm going to integrate myself with this. But for me, buy-in is like, that's still not enough. I want athletes challenging and questioning and having like really good open discussions. And for me, that's engagement. Like they're in the process, like coach, why are we doing this? I have this idea of what I want to measure. They have their own question. I'm trying to solve this in the field. Is what we're measuring now going to solve that? And so when we have these fruitful conversations, I think that's where it is. We could probably talk for hours about that. One thing I want to talk about around this question around kind of using the scientific method. Obviously, this is the House of Genes podcast. I'm going to bring people to a little bit of a behind the scenes moment you and I had. Last year, we were at PBT in Menlo. Shout out to Daniel Hicker running it again this year. And I think you and I got some late night ice cream somewhere. It was delicious. We had just done the conference all day long, people, and we wanted some ice cream. And you gave me some really good encouragement because I told you the sports world still has not fully accepted genetic testing. And not only do you have a background in that, and you've done our test, and it's not about endorsing 3x4, but you have a pretty good wealth of knowledge of this kind of stuff. And you were pretty encouraging to me, saying you have to keep on telling that story about why it's important. Here's the questions people are asking. Can you kind of give your input and how you see genetics can be a positive benefit? And obviously, you've also recognized that it has to be the right situation for most teams. Like when we talk about a scientific process in general, and our team's ready for this, that's also a key thing. But it can be helpful for people to hear another voice that's not just mine about like, hey, why would you consider a genetic test in general? And just to be clear for people to know, there's medical genetic testing, super valuable. And we're talking about identifying disease risk and stuff like that. That's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about lifestyle and sports and nutrigenomics, like what should I eat? How should I train? How should I recover? But what are your 2 cents on genetic testing and why the sporting world should at least consider it and start doing some sort of discovery about, is this the right fit for us?
Yeah, I just had an experience not working within team, but working for the player and the agent directly. And that was very eye-opening too, of like, I think one of the hurdles teams have is like, if we're going to move forward and adopt this thing at this cost, the ROI has to be this, and we have to know what to do with it. And I think when people think of genetics, nutrigenetics, they're like, cool, I understand that this is a part of me. I understand it probably plays into every part of everything we do and should be a filter. Do I, as a coach, understand it enough to know what to change? So I think that's the barrier teams see when they think about doing these things. What they haven't taken the step to do is like, how can I educate myself 10%? And all you need is 10% of information around this to make 100% improvement. And I don't mean that you're going to be injury free and that all your performance gains are going to be this, but we know in the bias of filter, when I'm thinking of the athlete in front of me, I'm already thinking their injury history. I'm already thinking the games they played last. I have all this information here or within whatever deck I've built within the operating system of my environment. Don't you think this should be another part of that? If we're going to and if your intimidation factor is I don't know enough, it's like it is easier now to have more information than ever. And the presentation of the information is like, to me, the simple part, especially with like the sport testing information, the layout that you guys give it. It's simple things too. Like you're already using beetroot, caffeine, and creatine. Would it be cool to know if like maybe their nutrigenetics hinted whether that's good for them? Cool. All that's in there, and that's like a very standard thing to use, and you didn't have to do three separate tests for that. So I think that people just don't realize like that it exists in a way that already answers some questions, or maybe questions some things that they're already doing. It's like, is that best? Because just because nutrition research says, and there's great health span and longevity research on creatine, well, how do you metabolize it? Maybe you actually need more. Maybe you actually need less. For me, I remember for my report, it's like efficient metabolizer. I'm like, fantastic. I'm taking my 5 grams every day. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, and then on caffeine, like I've always known that I've been super sensitive to caffeine and any type of stimulant or depressant, alcohol, whatever. And it showed that. So like sometimes it's really nice to have confirmation of the things that we can't see within our body, but we feel. And to start building that bridge of feeling, seeing, and knowing, I think is super important. And I can tap into that a little bit. Like as someone that I am a leukemia survivor, and it's like your body did something that you didn't expect, and it's like, oh, thank you. It's really helpful. I am super curious, and I know that there's a big difference in wanting to know to rule out things versus wanting to know of what to opt into in life. And I view data that way. I view it as something to, what else should I be saying yes to now? Not, hey, what should I be scared of or frightened of in the future? So that's how I look at data and information, and I've always been that way. But that doesn't mean that everyone is that way. So if it's like outside of team and more of like directly to the athlete, if you're considering and you have some fear about these things, like acknowledge that and maybe understanding like where does it come from and then educating yourself on that 10%. Then all of a sudden you might be more comfortable or more curious, or maybe it's not for you. Maybe it's a later down the road thing and you just need to learn and grow more as a person. And that's fine too.
I mean, honest with you, we've had honest conversations. And so this podcast isn't really meant to be so cleaned up. I'm just going to speak how I feel and be more open about it. You're a very curious person naturally. So it makes sense for you. Like, hey, if I think there's value, I'm just going to try it. If there's scientific evidence and there's some validity, let's test it so you can answer questions. And I just think like with so many coaches, I'll have this conversation with them and they're like, oh, that's a lot to learn. And you were like, well, maybe I just need to learn 10%. And I want to tell them like there was a point where you didn't understand force plates or GPS or like what is good exercise technique to do. Like there's a point you didn't know this.
Yeah.
And inherently we know that our genes are affected by everything we do. Driving to work, whatever food or liquids I'm consuming, all that kind of stuff. And for some coaches, I don't know if it's an ego thing. Like, well, what if it shows something that I've been doing wrong? Because for you and me, that we'd be like, oh, we want to know that. We'd go to our athlete and say, hey, guess what? We have better information now. We're just going to refine your program a bit. You are more prone to something super sensitive like ACL tears. You're more prone to it. But guess what? There's something we can do about it. And I don't know if it's an ego thing. And for me, it's tough in certain conversations because I'm like, how can I tell you something that's not going to be easy for you to hear, but it's going to be super valuable? Are you open to that? And I'll be honest, there's a lot of coaches that aren't. They're like, well, I don't know if the research is there. I'm like, okay, tell me what research you've read. And it's zero, right? And I'm like, well, I can provide you the research. And so I think you're right. It is this curiosity, but it's always tough too. When I'm looking at someone, I want to like grab their face and say like, we're here to help, Like you would never let a player play anymore unless they've done an EKG on their heart. You just wouldn't. And with my mindset, I would never let a player play if they haven't done a genetic test. Because I'm like, how can I like or lead you to food, like the right food you should be eating? I could be giving you something horrible for you that's going to affect your performance. Or like the caffeine thing. You could be a low responder and I'm just like pumping you with caffeine. And you're like, coach, I don't think it's hitting. Like you said, you inherently know this. I'm like, don't worry about it. Everyone has caffeine at the same time because everyone's the same. No, like everyone's different. So I don't know if it's an ego thing or if it is a scary thing. Like, well, maybe it's something that I have been doing wrong. But the truth is like, we all make small mistakes. And if we can fix those, shouldn't we like take ownership and say, let's do a test that makes sense?
Yeah,
Really tough.
I think you can even remove the word coach. I think it's just person, right? Like whether it's someone considering a test for themselves, an athlete is curious, this Gen Pop personal trainer, or a CEO that saw this on social media. It's like, oh, I'm curious, right? They were curious enough to watch something about it. Some people will stop there and they move on. And it's not because they may know that it's important, but having value and urgency versus important is different. So something being important versus something being urgent is how do you convert those into like what you're talking about, culture and buy-in versus what did you call the last one, engagement?
Hmm.
So how do you convert engagement into actually taking the step of taking a test? And I think that one, I love seeing that you can't really separate health, wellness, longevity, medical practice anymore in healthcare. It's like, what is it? How do you define it? And I'm like, meh. It's it's really hard. And it's so great because like I'm someone that sought out a naturopath in Alabama, right? Like it just because you get there later than other people doesn't mean it can't have 100% impact. And I think for a lot of people, they feel late to the game with things like, oh, everyone else started using insert AI agent here, has this doing this here. And it's like, it's, and even for myself, like, it takes a lot of courage for me to put out what I know. And not because yeah, maybe some imposter syndrome, which I think is very normal among coaches. But I think as a person, it's just like you have to get reps of doing something. So if you've never been curious about your medical data, you've built up all this friction. And let's say you also don't train, or you're a coach that has only done something one way. So you have all this friction built up to not being plastic. People that are curious have the most plasticity. It's like, oh, let me try that. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to adopt it into training, my $1 million asset at a number 9. Just meant I tried something, right, for myself. And so what I'd say is that if you're curious, like maybe this isn't the first touch point of the thing you dive into. That is where the sleep technology pieces, hardware pieces started off really well. Hey, how do we meet someone where they're at in a malleable hardware piece that kind of fits their lifestyle, whether it's a band, whether it's a ring, and now you're seeing people are like kind of device agnostic. Some people, we were loyal to our heart rate strap for a solid 20 years there. And it's like, that's the only way I could go. And now it's like, oh, well, I kind of wear this for this and I do that for that. And that's the way the world continues to grow, is like differentiating versus singular use case and only using this thing. So I think that people will have to get on board with adopting multiple things, and it's also diverse. It's like diversifying your portfolio builds less risk. If you diversify in the way you look at your health and trying to attack it from multiple lenses, then you're going to have a better understanding of what's truly going on. Because let's say I'm doing my genetic testing, my sleep stuff, my food stuff, and all of this. And it's like that Venn diagram of overlap is the truth and the reality of what present day is. But you have to be curious enough to start overlapping more component parts. And I think that's what a coach does really well. A really good coach overlaps all those true data things and then has the human interaction piece. And that to me is why coaching will never be replaceable, because no tool or device can replace the moment and the impact that we have and how we read and interact with one another, and then how I make decisions knowing in all of those things. But this information can be super impactful, and having me know the best and most pertinent information without having to dive through 20 hours of research to get there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, with AI now, you can get all that research a lot easier to consume. And I think as you're saying, like moving people along this process, it's just about curiosity. It's about reducing friction you probably built up. And I think on the team side, there's stuff that you and I have experienced that most people it'd be like totally foreign to them. It's like, wait, you solve how many problems? Like, what happened on the road? This
Yeah.
wasn't perfect. I just saw them on TV. Like, yeah, the 2 hours before they get on the field, it's a whole different story. I want to, well, number one, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts around genes and all that kind of stuff. Uh, we're gonna have a lot more of these episodes with you because you and I have such great conversations. Real quick, I have to do it. And if you're like, you know what, too big of a discussion, let's can it. No problem at all. What's your thoughts around, because we're kind of talking about athletes, but also like just people in general, because you and I work with a lot of athletes who are also retired. And so like, how do I become like a high performance human? What's your thoughts on peptides right now? It's so popular, right? There's so many discussions around it. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I haven't asked you this off camera, and I'm just curious where your head's at because I always appreciate your thoughts on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the emergence within society is like very fast right now, and people are really curious. But what they're looking for is like the cure all. How do I get faster without having to do the work, right?
Get them at
And
work.
yeah, and what I will say though is if you have so much friction built up to something to where if you can find something that is safe to take a step that gets you to doing the thing that you should be doing, aka the work, I can get around that. I used to do that all the time. Ask me when I buy new running shoes. Come on! Like, I think that, psychology of change is like, how do we earn something? How do we give ourselves something? How do we find motivation? It's like, well, the dopamine's sitting there all along, and that's actually the motivation thing that you need. And it comes from doing the thing that you want to do. And it's like, oh, so I cure myself. Yes.
Yeah.
But you have
Yeah.
to be willing to take that first step. And you know that I like sauna and plunge and bike ride and do all those things. And that doesn't mean I always want to, but I know the result on the other side. I'm like, man, it's going to feel so good. And I think that peptides, just to speak specifically into that, I love when science meets reality. Like, I remember Baylor, Darren Willoughby, like the things he could make in his biochem lab now are for sale on the internet. So like, I'm so happy that we're seeing healthcare become mainstream and people are asking these questions. I think that there are true realities if we're talking like local tissue, maybe expediting tissue healing rates after surgical interventions, or hey, I've been in pain my whole life. Could this potentially help with some of these factors? Why wouldn't you consider that? I think that is pain is a big problem, and the more we understand neurology, the more we understand pain science. Like that is a huge business. But if we can turn pain into performance, wow, what a gift you can give someone.
I want to segue real quick. We've talked a lot about the team side. I want to segue a little bit to what you're getting involved with now. I mean, 6 months ago, I thought you were going to say, hey, I'm going off the grid for a year and then I'll recheck with everybody. I'm just going to go learn and be curious, which I know you are doing. And then our boy Les gave you a call and said, hey, why don't you come do something special with me? So that was pretty cool to hear about what you're doing down there. But you're not in the team side currently. You did that for a long time. You won enough championships to be like, hey, I've done this at a high level. What's keeping you curious now? Where are you kind of floating off into as you go from the non-team side? I know that you said the health side of stuff is really important to you. And the truth is, in pro sports, there's a lot of teams that neglect the health side. It's all performance, no health. I know that kind of bothered you and I at different places, but what are you kind of getting into now that's non-team related, and what's exciting you right now?
Yeah, one, I get to consult with a couple companies that are just curious about that same thing as me. And it's like, how do we learn and intersect together to impact more people? So if my mission is to help 100 million people, that's part of it. The other intersection is we've worked in performance. There are so many influencers that have access to all the people, and performance coaches think they know all the things. Well, both can be true. So how can we merge those communities together so we actually create more of an impact within the communities that influencers intuitively build to help them have the high performance lifestyle I'd love for people to feel like they've achieved for themselves, which again is different for everyone. So I've been able to go and invest in a lot of those relationships that I've built in my network over the past 20 years and just spend time. And when I just was on the phone earlier, when you can instead of sending an email every other week to a text every once, you know, every couple of days to, hey, I'm going to come spend 6 hours in 3 days with you. It, so much things, it just moves, it expedites the whole process. And you get to quickly know what is a no for you and what is a let's do something together. And so people are like, oh, what do you want to do now? I'm like, I want to work with good people and interesting things. And those interesting things have to align with my core mission and my values. And when you've been in a space for so long, like think about it, most coaches that have done and worked in professional sports, our season's what, 11 and a half months, right? Like we had very few days off in the past few years. It's when you do get time off, it's typically in December, so it means you probably have to do some form of visiting family, and then maybe you take a vacation for yourself, and then you're back in it. That doesn't leave time to actually check in with that network that you have and try and build something. So I get to be super selfish and go and build things with the people that I want to.
Yep.
I've built things for myself. I started a company called Signal Strength, and I'm basically just how do I interact and work with people and help them. And so I have a handful of people I work with and do that for. And I think the other piece is just education. Like, how do I help people to see how I see coaching and how I see physiology and how I see training? And how do you start to care about, we've talked about this before, the higher level systems of the body? And where does that interplay happen? And I don't think that's really happening in elite sport. You have the right people that are curious about the right things, but again, they don't feel like they know enough to take that step. So how do you meet people where they're at in terms of education? That's what I've been doing.
And fairness in team sport, like what you're talking about now is you have created more time for yourself. So if you're like, hey, for 3 days, I can go down to Austin and see my buddies in Texas anywhere, and we're going to talk about wherever and like, let our brains be curious. That's super valuable. When you are on a winning team and you have 2 or 3 weeks off in the off season, the truth is you're not going to go spend time to be curious. You're like, I want to hang with family. I need to reset for myself. There's two major issues that I had, at least in the soccer world, is number one, there wasn't this environment of, 2 or 3 weeks out of a season, which is the whole year. I want you to take off. And if that 1 week you need to be like, you know what, I'm going to Hawaii, I'm doing no work and just decompressing, then yeah, we're going to get more out of you. Or if it's like, you know what, I want to go be curious in Spain and I want to go visit another team, great. I think more teams need to kind of adopt that where like number one, I was talking about this with people at 3x4. In the pro sports world, you don't respect PTO at all. And the purpose of PTO is to allow people to refresh and get the most out of them. And I always think if I ever worked with a team in that capacity again, that'd be one of the biggest things is like, how do we set up our people for success? Where they can go refresh and like have no judgments about anything. If they're like, hey, I know it's preseason, but in week 5, I need to go take 4 days to go explore Zion, and just like be with nature. I'd be like, great. Like anytime you need it, let's plan for it. Let's go. And then the second thing too is like, at least in pro soccer, the compensation plans are ridiculous in the performance medical side. And so I'm pretty passionate about that, like bringing awareness to it. Like where's the value at? What are people doing? How are we supporting people with the right teams? Not just saying, Meg, I know you can do everything, so you're just going to do it. Versus saying like, I know you can do it all, but like, how do we build a team around you so that everyone's successful?
Yeah,
So
I think the other piece of that too is you just highlighted if we take PTO, we have to choose is it for us or do we have to go learn? And a lot of coaches, if they choose time for themselves, they know it's at the cost of continuing education. So what they end up doing is merging the two together a lot, which means you're not getting 100% of either. It's like, oh yeah, I went to Italy to do this course and then I had 2 days to explore. It was cool. And it was like, you didn't fully get to experience either because you knew one part of it was for work and part of it was for you. And even if you're going to learn this super specific thing and you're the elite of the elite at this assessment or this type of whatever, your brain doesn't switch that easily. Like I know when I go on vacation, the first day I'm adjusting, I'm still doing logistics, all those things. By day two, three, I finally am like in the full emerged experience, and it's like you need more time than you think. And actually, my therapist said this when I was leaving team sports. He's like, hey, in this next year too, he's like, you don't get to judge yourself on how long it takes you to feel like you're ready for something. And he's like, most people never give themselves the space to actually feel how much work and investment they had put into something before jumping into the next thing because it feels good. Like we are often the people that rescue situations, rescue people, and whether it looks like training or rehab or whatever. So we love to feel that. That's like my version of a particular high is like being helpful. So how do you not ascertain that your value in the world is just based off of that thing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's all. Again, we're going to have so many conversations. The thing I'm actually most passionate about, I talk about this all the time, is coaches get wrapped up in their identity being the crest on the shirt. When I'm like, I actually don't care who Megan works for. I know her as a human and what cares about and what she's passionate about. That's more important to me. You might be on assignment somewhere, your assignment's at Seattle or it's in Auburn, whatever it is. But I think more coaches need to have this conversation of like, my identity is not attached to what I do. My identity is attached to who I was created to be and how I can support, make impact in this world. But I'm not going to be on different assignments, right? And your assignments have been all over the place. It's a whole nother thing that I think it's not talked about enough. And when you do get fired from a team or you're like, you know what, it's time for me to leave, people go through this stage of like, who am I now? And I hope there's more conversations where their close-knit group comes around and says, hey, I know who you are. Like, let me reinforce real quick who you are. Like you serve your friends, you love cold plunging, like you love spending time around people, all those kind of things. You are not the crest on the shirt. It doesn't mean we disrespect the crest. It's just that like that's not who we are. That's just what we do. And I think that is a whole nother conversation where if I can leave this earth and that's what people remember, like, okay, he really helped to detach identity from assignment. I think that I'd be like, yeah, I served the sports community well. So that's one thing I
I,
talk
I
about.
just to support in that too. It's hard to separate when you spend 86% of every moment of your life around that team or whatever that assignment is. And so I think that that's natural. You have to actually do a lot of work on the inverse to and be curious about yourself and sit with yourself and be present and be intentional. And the best example I can give for coaches is like if all you do is work out where your facility is, please just go to a Gen Pop gym and tell me how uncomfortable you feel that one, you can't just set up your whole workout the way you want it and no one's going to touch it. Two, that other people there's so many people doing things that you would perceive as wrong or different or whatever maybe judgment you place of others. And then two, the judgment, maybe you feel a spotlight on yourself or whatever that is, all the made up psychology behind all those things. And then it's like, how was your experience of that? Because that's probably how your athletes actually feel every time they walk into the gym and the team is training. And it's like, oh, you've never thought of that. You think that you just create this environment, you connect with the people, but that doesn't mean that they're comfortable. Like it's a job for them. It's a job. And even when we have deep, meaningful relationships, that means they like you as a person. That's not their relationship with training. So yeah, we definitely could talk more about that.
I want to wrap up here with a few
Mm.
not like rapid fire questions. I don't want to rush it, but there's supposed to be a little bit of quick hitters. Just to finish it off here. 3 questions. I might slip a fourth one in there, but we'll see. If you got lost into a sport you'd never worked with in the next 12 months or a community group you never worked with, and by community group, I mean like High Rock as an example, like, oh, I'm going to support the High Rock because I think that's a great thing for people to get involved with. That's a fun entry point for fitness and it's competitive. If you were to get lost or recruited into a sports or community that is different than what you've done in the past, you've never done it before, what would that be where you're like, yeah, that'd be cool. I've never done that, but I'd be down for those type of people.
Am I doing or coaching?
You're coaching for
Okay.
sure.
I think that, it's already naturally happening. I have so many friends that are so curious about, we'll call it hybrid fitness, right? And I definitely think that's part of it because the whole goal is doing something that more people can do that's not as specialized as gymnastics moves or Olympic lifting. And if the whole goal is creating competition, which I love for everyone, like there's so many good parts you learn about yourself and others when you compete. It probably is something like that. And then I'll tell you, I really enjoyed. I went to the training for the Seattle Torrent and the Kraken ice hockey. I just find that super interesting. And I don't want to learn how to ice skate because that sounds terrible. But just the falling factor, I love water, not land in that way. But yeah, I think that it's like from a Gen Pop standpoint, it's something around that. From a sports specific standpoint, I'm super curious about. I've always loved surfing, and I think ice hockey is interesting. Just the collision nature of some of those sports, and then interaction with water, and then the psychology of individual sport versus team sport. So, but yeah, in Gen Pop, the hybrid fitness model is. I have a couple former players actually that are competing, and I know some people going to High Rocks World Championships. So, like, I'm excited to see them go for their thing. Like, I love being able to support people going for their thing.
Ice hockey there's water and ice too, so you can kind of get there. Okay, a few more quick ones. You mentioned when it comes to genetics, you thought some of the ergogenic aids were really cool. What's one of your favorite things you learned about doing genetic tests? You're like, oh, that's cool to learn about.
I actually pulled mine up because I was like, what it was one that I felt like helped inform a lot of other things. It was my post-training inflammation is high. So like how do I think about training with just a gentle acknowledgement of how I should do initial acute recovery? And I'm fortunate enough to have a hyperbaric chamber, and now I just leverage it a lot more immediately post-training instead of going to like the things I would normally do.
You and I love hyperbaric, and we'll talk about it another time, but that's awesome. I'm going to ask two more. Number three, the first question was about which group would you get involved with? In the next 6 months, if I said you have to do a sport or event that you've never done before in your life, training for, what is that?
That question.
I know.
It's probably there's a ride here my partner just asked me to do. It's called Obliterate. It's like a cancer charity ride and it's a century ride. I've never done a century ride. I don't really want to do it, but that
Yeah.
might be what we're doing.
Okay, cool. Last question is not to be so morbid. We're talking about health span, longevity, all that kind of stuff. You've got one more message to leave coaches, your community, anything. What is that message? You're like, hey, if I could leave you with anything outside of sets and reps and that kind of stuff, what's one piece of advice or insight you've learned in your life that you really feel like could really impact someone's life?
I didn't make this quote up, but I think about it quite often. Days move slow, years move fast. Like you're in it and maybe your day is moving slow, but then you turn around and it's 10 months later. It's never too late to start. So if you're waiting on something, quit waiting and just start.
Hmm. Yeah, so good. I was reading I love reading like different things about wisdom, and I was reading in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's kind of like everything's like catching smoke. You just can't do it. So like if you're aligned with your purpose, like enjoy the people you're around, enjoy the food that you're eating, enjoy what you're going after because it's all smoke at the end of the day. We can't capture any of it, and we're just along for the ride. So that's what that made me think of. Uh, Before we sign off, I think you have such a wealth of information, but I think your heart is always centered around how can I help people? And I know if anyone DMs you or messages you, like you're always getting back to them. How can people reach you if they want to ask you questions or learn more about your story or kind of what you're doing? Where's the best place? Is it Instagram? Is there other places?
Yeah, Instagram for now is like the best. So Coach Mega Strong on Instagram, and then uh, just use my link tree to find out further information.
Cool. So we'll definitely tag that. You have so much knowledge, so much wisdom, but I just love your heart and we had great conversations. I'm sure at some point we're going to have ice cream at midnight somewhere on some random street, which is great because you know me, I never say no to dessert. I don't know if it's
Even
that.
though it's gonna just make your HRV boom.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Hey, like I said, good
Choose your
people
day.
choose the day. There we go. Other than that, this is the House of Jeans podcast with Coach Megan Young. We will have a part 2 with her at some point. Megan, thanks for being on the podcast. It was an absolute pleasure.